You ever had one of those nights where every creak and shadow seems alive, like the house itself is breathing, watching? I swear to you, this isn't just some overactive imagination thing. What I went through, it changed me. It all started on a Friday night. I was house sitting for my aunt. She lives in this big, old Victorian place on the edge of town. Gorgeous house during the day, stained glass windows, creaky wooden floors, even one of those spiral staircases that look like they lead to a tower where someone probably died. But at night, man, it's a whole different vibe. She was off on some cruise, and I volunteered to look after her cat, Smokey. Easy gig, right? Feed the cat, water the plants, binge some Netflix. Piece of cake. Or so I thought. The first night was uneventful. Smokey mostly kept to himself, curling up on the couch and giving me that slow blink cats do when they're either judging you or too lazy to care. But then came the second night. It was around midnight. I was sprawled on the couch, half watching some true crime documentary, when I heard it, the faintest knock at the front door, 3 soft raps. At first, I thought it was just my imagination. Maybe the wind. But then it came again, louder this time. Knock, knock, knock. I muted the TV, straining to listen. My heart was already racing, but I tried to play it cool. Probably some idiot at the wrong house, I muttered, getting up. The front porch light wasn't working, so the area beyond the door was pitch black. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice shaky enough to embarrass me. No answer. I stood there for a moment, debating whether to open the door. The knocking had stopped, but I swear I could feel someone on the other side. My hand hovered over the doorknob, but then Smokey let out this low, guttural growl behind me. I turned around to see him standing in the middle of the living room, his fur puffed up like he'd stuck a paw in a socket. He was staring at the door, and his growl turned into this eerie yowl that sent shivers down my spine. "Okay, no thanks," I muttered, stepping back from the door. I locked it, deadbolt, chain, everything, and turned off the porch light just in case. Smokey stayed glued to the spot, his eyes wide and unblinking. "All right, buddy, it's fine," I said, mostly to myself. But even as I walked back to the couch, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I sat back on the couch, trying to shake off the unease. Smokey, however, wasn't letting it go. He stayed rooted in place, staring at the door like he expected it to burst open at any second. His growls turned into a strange, almost whining noise. I'd never seen him act like that before. "Okay, Smokey, relax," I said, my voice more for my own reassurance than his. But deep down, I wasn't relaxed at all. I grabbed my phone and checked the time, 12:17 a.m. My aunt had warned me that the area was quiet, but she hadn't mentioned anything about late-night visitors. I decided to distract myself, flipping through the apps on my phone. But even with the brightness turned up, the screen didn't feel like enough light. That's when I noticed it. The front window, the one by the door, had sheer curtains that let in just enough moonlight to create a faint glow. And in that glow, I saw it, a shadow. At first, I thought it was just a tree branch swaying, but no. This shadow was different. It wasn't moving with the wind, and it wasn't random. It was tall, almost human-shaped, and it just stood there. My breath caught in my throat. "Nope," I whispered, as quietly as I could. I turned off the TV, plunging the room into silence, and crawled to the corner of the couch, phone clutched in my hand. I thought about calling someone, a friend, the cops, anyone, but I didn't want to sound like a lunatic. The shadow shifted. It leaned just slightly, as if it were trying to peer through the window. "Who the hell is out there?" I hissed under my breath. Smokey let out a sudden yowl and bolted upstairs, leaving me completely alone. I considered following him, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the window, and then the shadow moved again. It didn't walk away. It didn't run. It just dissolved, like smoke being sucked into the night. I sat there, frozen, for what felt like hours, but was probably just a few minutes. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode. Finally, I mustered the courage to stand up and peek through the curtain. Nothing. The porch was empty, the yard still. Even the street beyond was quiet, bathed in the pale glow of the street lights. I let out a shaky laugh. "You're losing it," I muttered to myself. But just as I was about to turn away, something caught my eye. Footprints, clear as day, right there on the porch, were two muddy footprints leading up to the door. My stomach dropped. The porch had been dry all day. Where had the mud come from? And more importantly, where had the person gone? I sat back on the couch, trying to shake off the unease. Smokey, however, wasn't letting it go. He stayed rooted in place, staring at the door like he expected it to burst open at any second. His growls turned into a strange, almost whining noise. I'd never seen him act like that before. "Okay, Smokey, relax," I said, my voice more for my own reassurance than his. But deep down, I wasn't relaxed at all. I grabbed my phone and checked the time, 12:17 a.m. My aunt had warned me that the area was quiet, but she hadn't mentioned anything about late-night visitors. I decided to distract myself, flipping through the apps on my phone. But even with the brightness turned up, the screen didn't feel like enough light. That's when I noticed it. The front window, the one by the door, had sheer curtains that let in just enough moonlight to create a faint glow. And in that glow, I saw it. A shadow. At first I thought it was just a tree branch swaying, but no. This shadow was different. It wasn't moving with the wind, and it wasn't random. It was tall, almost human-shaped, and it just stood there, my breath caught in my throat. "Nope," I whispered as quietly as I could. I turned off the TV, plunging the room into silence, and crawled to the corner of the couch, phone clutched in my hand. I thought about calling someone, a friend, the cops, anyone, but I didn't want to sound like a lunatic. The shadow shifted. It leaned, just slightly, as if it were trying to peer through the window. "Who the hell is out there?" I hissed under my breath. Smokey let out a sudden yowl and bolted upstairs, leaving me completely alone. I considered following him, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the window. And then the shadow moved again. It didn't walk away. It didn't run. It just dissolved, like smoke being sucked into the night. I sat there, frozen for what felt like hours, but was probably just a few minutes. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode. Finally, I mustered the courage to stand up and peek through the curtain. Nothing. The porch was empty, the yard still. Even the street beyond was quiet, bathed in the pale glow of the streetlights. I let out a shaky laugh. "You're losing it," I muttered to myself. But just as I was about to turn away, something caught my eye. Footprints. Clear as day, right there on the porch, were two muddy footprints leading up to the door. My stomach dropped. The porch had been dry all day. Where had the mud come from? And more importantly, where had the person gone? I stumbled back from the window, my pulse thundering in my ears. My brain was scrambling to make sense of it. Maybe it was some prank? Maybe a delivery guy left something? But the thing is, no one had walked away. The footprints stopped right at the door. I locked every door and window after that, double-checking like a maniac. Smokey hadn't come back downstairs, and I wasn't about to go wandering around that big, dark house alone to look for him. Instead, I retreated to the living room and grabbed the first thing I could find for protection, a fireplace poker. I sat there, gripping the cold metal, the silence around me growing louder with every passing second. It's funny, you don't realize how many sounds a house makes until you're terrified. The creak of the wood, the hum of the fridge, even my own breathing sounded too loud. But then came a sound I couldn't ignore. Thud, thud, thud. It was coming from upstairs. I froze, clutching the poker tighter. My mind raced through the possibilities. Smokey? Maybe he knocked something over. But no. This was deliberate. Heavy, like footsteps. "Smokey!" I called out, my voice cracking. The thudding stopped. My heart felt like it was trying to claw its way out of my chest. I stood up slowly, the poker shaking in my hands. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, but where would I go? It was pitch black outside, and whatever was happening didn't seem like the kind of thing I could just outrun. The stairs loomed ahead of me, their dark, twisting shape blending into the shadows. I took one cautious step forward, then another, the old wood groaning beneath my feet. "Smokey?" I tried again, quieter this time. Nothing. I reached the top of the stairs and paused. The hallway stretched out in both directions, the doors to the bedrooms and bathrooms slightly ajar. A faint draft brushed against my face, and I realized one of the windows must have been open. "Come on, man," I whispered to myself. "You're fine. Just check the rooms, find the cat, and get the hell back downstairs." I pushed open the first door on the left, my aunt's bedroom. The room was empty, the bed perfectly made, but something felt wrong. The air was heavier here, like the walls were closing in. The window was wide open, the curtains flapping gently in the breeze. I hurried over and shut it, locking the latch before stepping back. That's when I noticed the smell. It was faint but unmistakable, a sickly metallic tang that turned my stomach. Blood. My hands were slick with sweat as I backed out of the room. My aunt didn't own anything dangerous, no knives or firearms, so what the hell could have caused that smell? As I turned to leave, a whisper brushed past my ear. "Stay." I spun around so fast I nearly fell, the poker raised high. The room was empty. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice echoing down the hallway. Nothing. I stumbled out of the room, slamming the door shut behind me. My breathing was ragged, panic threatening to take over. I glanced down the hall, and that's when I saw it. At the end of the corridor, just outside the attic door, something was standing there. It wasn't human, it was tall, unnaturally so, with limbs that seemed too long, and a head that tilted to the side like it was studying me. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, and its eyes were black pits, hollow and endless. I froze, unable to move or breathe. The thing raised a hand, its fingers curling slowly, as if beckoning me closer. And then it spoke, its voice a guttural rasp that scraped against my ears. "You shouldn't have come here." My legs felt like they were glued to the floor. I wanted to scream, to run, to do something, but I couldn't move. My mind was a storm of fear and disbelief. Was this some kind of nightmare? A hallucination? The thing took a step toward me, its movement slow and deliberate, like it had all the time in the world. Each step made the old wooden floor creak, and with every sound my heart pounded harder in my chest. I don't know what you want," I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. It didn't respond, just kept coming closer. My grip tightened on the fireplace poker, though I doubted it would do much against whatever this thing was. And then it stopped, right in front of the attic door. It raised one of its grotesquely long fingers and pointed to the handle, its black eyes boring into mine. "Open it," it rasped, the words scratching at my brain like nails on a chalkboard. "No," I blurted out, shaking my head. "I'm not opening anything." The thing tilted its head further, an unnatural angle that made my stomach churn. Then it smiled. Not a human smile, not even close. Its mouth stretched impossibly wide, revealing rows of jagged teeth that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. "You've already opened the door," it hissed, its voice dripping with malice. Before I could respond, the thing disappeared. Not like it ran away or faded into the shadows. It was just gone, like a light being switched off. I stood there, staring at the empty space where it had been, my legs shaking so badly I thought I might collapse. My brain screamed at me to get the hell out of that house, but my feet wouldn't move. That's when I heard the attic door creak open behind me. Slowly, painfully, I turned around. The door was ajar, revealing nothing but blackness beyond. A cold draft seeped out, carrying with it that same metallic stench from my aunt's bedroom. "Smokey," I whispered, as if saying his name would somehow make this all go away. But deep down, I knew it wasn't Smokey up there. The door opened wider, and I heard something breathing, heavy, labored, like whatever was in the attic had been waiting for a long time. "Nope. No way," I muttered, backing away. But before I could make it to the stairs, the breathing turned into a low growl, and then came the sound of something moving. It was fast, too fast. I spun around and bolted down the stairs, my feet barely touching the steps. I didn't look back. I couldn't. My only thought was to get out, to get as far away from that house as possible. When I hit the living room, I skidded to a stop. The front door was wide open, and standing just outside, in the pale glow of the porch light, was the shadow. It raised its hand again, beckoning me forward. My chest heaved, my mind racing. I couldn't go back upstairs, not with whatever was in the attic. And I couldn't just stay here. The shadow didn't wait. It turned and started walking down the driveway, its form dissolving into the darkness. Against all logic, I followed it, stepped onto the porch, the cold night air biting my skin. Every instinct screamed at me to go back inside, lock the doors, and hide. But there was no safety in that house anymore, not with whatever that was in the attic. The shadow had drifted halfway down the driveway, its form flickering in and out of view like a bad signal. It didn't walk like a person. It floated, its feet never quite touching the ground. I clutched the fireplace poker tighter, my knuckles white as I hesitated on the porch. "Where are you taking me?" I called out, my voice shaking. It didn't answer, of course. It just kept moving, pulling me deeper into the night. I stepped off the porch, my shoes crunching against the gravel. The street ahead was eerily quiet, the houses on either side dark and lifeless. No cars, no wind, just an oppressive silence that made my ears ring. I should have turned back. I knew I should have turned back, but I didn't. I rounded the corner and found myself standing at the edge of the woods. My aunt had always told me to stay away from this area at night. "It's too easy to get lost out there," she'd said, her tone half warning, half joking. But now, standing there with the darkness pressing in around me, her words felt like a prophecy. The shadow was waiting for me just inside the tree line. Its form seemed to shimmer, blending with the surrounding darkness until it was almost indistinguishable. "Why?" I whispered, more to myself than to it. As if in response, it pointed again, this time toward the heart of the forest. I didn't want to go. I wanted to turn around, run back to the house, and pretend none of this was happening. But something, some force I couldn't explain, pushed me forward. The trees closed in around me, their twisted branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The air grew colder, and that metallic stench I'd smelled upstairs was back, stronger now, almost overwhelming. The shadow moved ahead, gliding through the trees without a sound. I followed, each step feeling heavier than the last, and then I saw it, a clearing. In the center of the clearing stood an old crumbling well. Its stones were slick with moss, and the wooden frame above it looked ready to collapse. The shadow stopped beside the well, its form flickering again. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice barely audible. It didn't answer. Instead, it leaned over the edge of the well, peering down into the darkness. A chill ran through me. I didn't want to get any closer, but my feet betrayed me. Step by step, I approached the well, the shadow's presence growing heavier, darker, until it felt like the night itself was pressing down on me. When I reached the edge, I hesitated. The smell was strongest here, rising up from the depths like a living thing. My stomach churned, but I couldn't stop myself. I had to look. I leaned over the edge and stared down. At first I saw nothing but darkness, but then, slowly, something began to take shape. Eyes, dozens of them, staring up at me from the inky blackness below. The eyes, they didn't blink, they just stared, wide, unblinking and shining with a faint, otherworldly glow. My breath hitched, and I stumbled back, almost losing my footing. "What the hell is this?" I whispered, my voice trembling. The shadow stood unmoving by the well, its head tilted, as if watching me. But now it wasn't alone. I hadn't noticed them at first. Figures emerging from the trees, dozens of them. They were pale, almost translucent, their features blurry and incomplete, like they were half-formed. They moved slowly, shuffling toward the clearing, their eyes empty sockets that seemed to drink in the dim moonlight. "Stay back!" I shouted, brandishing the fireplace poker like it would do any good. They didn't stop. My chest heaved as I turned back to the well. The eyes were still there, but now they were moving, shifting, as if something below was stirring. I don't know why I did it, but I looked at the shadow. "What do you want from me?" I yelled, my voice cracking. It raised a hand and pointed to the well again. "No way," I said, shaking my head. The air grew colder. The figures were getting closer, circling the clearing like vultures, their hollow eyes locked onto me, their movements eerily synchronized. "I'm not doing this," I screamed, backing away. "I don't care what this is. I'm not a part of it." But then I heard it, a voice. It was faint at first, a whisper carried on the wind. But as I strained to hear, it grew louder, clearer. "Help me!" It was coming from the well. I froze, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. The voice was soft, desperate. It didn't sound like the growling rasp of the shadow or the heavy breathing from the attic. It sounded human. "Please," the voice pleaded again. "Help me." The figures had stopped moving now, forming a silent ring around the well. The shadow remained still, its dark, hollow presence more oppressive than ever. "Who's down there?" I called out, my voice shaking. "Please, don't leave me," the voice begged, cracking with emotion. Against all reason, I stepped closer to the well. My hands trembled as I gripped the edge, leaning over to peer into the darkness. The eyes had vanished, but the voice was louder now, echoing up from the depths. "I'm trapped," it said. "I've been trapped for so long. Please, help me." My gut twisted. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to run, but something about the voice held me there, rooted to the spot. "How do I help you?" I asked, the words spilling out before I could stop them. The figures around me began to hum, low and mournful, like a funeral dirge. The sound made my skin crawl, but I couldn't pull away from the well. "Let me out," the voice whispered. "It's the only way." I shook my head, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. "I don't even know what you are." "Please," it said so softly I almost didn't hear it. "Don't leave me here. Alone." The shadow moved then, its form rippling as it stretched toward me. I stumbled back, tripping over a loose stone and falling hard onto the ground. The shadow loomed over the well, its head turning toward me one last time. "You opened the door," it rasped. "Now close it." Before I could process what it meant, the ground beneath me began to shake. The figures around the clearing swayed in unison, their hum rising to an ear-piercing wail. The well! Something was climbing out of the well. A hand appeared first, long pale fingers slick with dark viscous liquid. Then another. I scrambled to my feet, heart pounding, as a head emerged, its face twisted and inhuman, with empty black eyes and a mouth too wide to belong to anything natural. "Run," the shadow whispered. For once I didn't argue. I turned and bolted into the forest, the screams of the figures and the thing from the well chasing me into the darkness. I didn't stop running. I couldn't. My legs burned as I pushed through the trees, branches clawing at my face and arms, but I didn't care. All that mattered was putting as much distance as possible between me and that God-forsaken well. The thing was still behind me. I could feel it. The air had shifted, and that metallic smell, the one from the attic, from the figures, from the well, clung to everything. I heard the sound of shuffling footsteps, like something dragging itself through the dirt. I glanced over my shoulder once. The clearing was gone. The figures, the shadow, the well, all of it had vanished. I was alone, or so I thought, but the silence that followed felt unnatural, like the woods themselves were holding their breath. But then the voice came again. "Help me." I froze. My skin went ice cold. It was distant, like the voice was miles away, yet it rang in my ears like it was right next to me. I turned, my heart in my throat, but saw nothing. The trees were thick, the night was still, and everything felt off. Too still. "Please, you have to let me out." I felt something brush against my leg, cold and sharp. I whipped around, but again there was nothing. No, not nothing. Something was watching me. I wasn't alone. I could sense it. The eyes that were tracking my every movement. The presence that seemed to press against my back like it was about to devour me. I tried to run again, my steps faltering in the darkness. The path in front of me seemed to shift, bending at odd angles like the trees were moving themselves. I was lost, and then, through the haze of fear, I saw it. A flicker of light. It was faint but unmistakable, a dim glow, soft and steady, just beyond a thicket of trees. Without thinking, I sprinted toward it, hoping it was the safety of my aunt's house, hoping it was something that could pull me out of this nightmare. The light grew brighter as I neared, casting long shadows that danced eerily across the ground. When I broke through the final line of trees, my breath caught in my throat. The house was there, but it wasn't my aunt's. It was a house I didn't recognize. The structure was old, decaying, like something that belonged in another time, in another place. Its windows were dark, but the door was wide open, beckoning me in. A chill ran down my spine, but I didn't hesitate. I stepped forward, the air growing colder with every step I took. The door creaked as it swung inward, revealing a narrow hallway bathed in the same soft, unsettling light. I didn't know what to expect, but this wasn't it. The walls were lined with mirrors, hundreds of them. They stretched from floor to ceiling, reflecting the hallway back upon itself in endless repetition. And standing at the far end of the hallway, in the very last mirror, was a figure. It was me. No, it wasn't me. It was a reflection, but it was wrong. The eyes, my eyes, were black, hollow. There was no life in them. I blinked, but the figure didn't move. It stayed there, staring back at me, and then slowly it smiled. The smile wasn't mine. It was wider, too wide, stretching impossibly across the face. "No!" I shouted, stepping back. I turned to run. But when I glanced at the mirrors along the hallway, I saw the same reflection, me with that same empty smile. "Help me." The voice came again. It was louder now, surrounding me, echoing off the mirrors. "Help me!" I backed away, heart pounding, my breaths coming in short, shallow gasps. The walls felt like they were closing in on me, the mirrors reflecting too many of me, too many versions. Each one smiling, each one with those black, hollow eyes. I stumbled backward, only to hit something solid. I turned around, panic rising in my chest, but there was nothing there, except for the shadow. It was standing just behind me, as if it had always been there, blending into the darkness of the hallway. Its head was tilted, eyes locked onto me with a cold, silent intensity. "You should have never come," it whispered. I didn't wait to hear more. I bolted for the door, crashing into it with all my weight. The wood splintered, but it didn't open. I yanked at the handle, my fingers slick with sweat, but the door wouldn't budge. Behind me, I heard the whisper again, louder now. "You opened it. Now close it." The air grew thick, pressing in from every side. The mirrors were closing in on me, the reflections getting closer, the dark figures creeping in from the edges of my vision. I couldn't breathe. I was going to suffocate in here. I grabbed the nearest mirror, pulling it off the wall with a sharp crack. The glass shattered, but as I did, I caught a glimpse of my own face in the shards, only it wasn't my face anymore. It was the thing's face. My hand trembled as I held the shards in front of me, the black eyes of the reflection staring back with a twisted grin. I could feel it now. The presence, the thing in the mirrors, the shadow behind me, the weight of it pressing against me from every angle. I couldn't escape, and somewhere deep within the darkness, I knew the only way out was to close the door. I couldn't breathe. My lungs were tight, suffocated by the oppressive air. The more I struggled to escape, the closer everything seemed to draw in, until I felt like I was drowning in the weight of it all. The mirrors were closing in on me, their glass reflecting every wrong angle of my terrified face, stretching the shadows, the figures, into grotesque shapes that I couldn't outrun. The voice came again, louder this time, a maddening crescendo of whispers that filled every corner of the hallway. Close it. Close it. Close the door. I felt my body tremble, my legs shaking so violently I almost collapsed. My mind screamed for a way out, for something, anything, to stop the nightmare from consuming me whole. The door wouldn't open. It was solid, unyielding. It felt like it had become part of the house itself, an extension of whatever dark force was behind this, keeping me trapped in this endless loop of horror. But there was one thing I hadn't tried yet. I didn't have the strength to keep fighting the mirrors, or the shadow, or the oppressive presence of whatever dark force haunted this place. But the one thing I had left was the will to end it. Close it, I whispered, my voice shaking as I stared into the jagged edges of the broken mirror. The reflection of the thing grinned at me, its teeth too sharp, its eyes too wide. And then it spoke in a voice that was my own, my voice, twisted beyond recognition. Don't you want to join me? I recoiled. The glass shards were slick with sweat, but I gripped them tighter, my desperation pushing me to act. I didn't know what would happen if I did it, but I knew it was my only choice. Without thinking, I thrust the shard of mirror forward, slashing at the edges of the broken door. The glass shivered, cutting into the frame like it was nothing more than paper. It felt wrong, unnatural, but I didn't stop. I kept slashing, over and over, until there was a crack, a long, jagged crack running through the middle of the door. And then, silence. The room stilled. The mirrors stopped reflecting. The shadow behind me froze, its twisted figure pausing in the dim light. For one fleeting moment, I thought it was over. But then the door splintered, the crack widened, and something reached through it. Not the shadow, not the figures, but something worse. I watched, paralyzed with fear, as the dark shape forced its way into the hallway. A hand, skeletal, with skin stretched tight over brittle bones, pushed through the crack, followed by the rest of the thing. It was tall, taller than anything I'd ever seen, its limbs contorted and elongated, a grotesque mix of human and something far worse. Its face was featureless, save for an endless void where its eyes should have been. The emptiness stretched outward, swallowing everything in its path. I screamed, a gut-wrenching sound that echoed off the walls, but it didn't stop. The thing kept coming, pulling itself through the door, and I could feel the very air growing colder, as if the thing was pulling the warmth from the room itself. Close it, it whispered again. But now the voice was inside my head, wrapped around my thoughts like a vice. You've opened it. Now you have to close it. I stumbled backward, hitting the floor hard, but I couldn't take my eyes off it. This wasn't a creature made of flesh and blood. This was something ancient, something that shouldn't exist in the realm of the living. And yet, it was here. It reached out, its long fingers brushing the air like it was testing the space between us. "No," I gasped. I didn't mean to open anything." The thing didn't answer. Instead, it took another step forward, its presence swallowing the room whole. The air was thick now, almost suffocating. I could feel the walls closing in, the floor beneath me trembling as if the house itself were alive. I had to move, but my body wouldn't respond. And then I remembered. The well, the door, the attic. This thing, it wasn't just a shadow or a manifestation. It was the door, the one I had opened. It had followed me. It had always been waiting. I had to close it, before it took everything. I scrambled to my feet, the shards of the broken mirror slipping from my hands as I lunged toward the door. I didn't know how to stop it, but I had to try. With every ounce of strength I had left, I threw myself against the door. Nothing happened. I tried again, slamming my shoulder into the frame, but the door barely budged. The thing inched closer, its breath or whatever passed for it, cold against my skin. I could feel it now, a deep, gnawing hunger in the air. It wanted me, and I wanted out. "Close it," I whispered, tears streaming down my face as I pressed my palms against the crack in the door. "I have to close it." And then, just when I thought it was too late, I felt it. A shift, a click, like a lock turning. The crack in the door closed, the air suddenly lighter, the shadows retreating. The thing screeched, a horrible screeching sound that tore at the very fabric of the world, but I didn't stop. The door sealed shut, and everything fell silent. The silence was deafening. I stood there, frozen, my body trembling from the raw terror that still clung to me like a second skin. The air around me had become thick again, the weight of it pressing down with a suffocating force. But the thing, the creature, the shadow, was gone. I dared not move. The echoes of its screeching still rang in my mind, reverberating in the silence. My hands were slick with sweat as I slowly let them fall to my sides, my eyes fixed on the door. It was sealed, but I knew better than to think it was over. I backed away, my feet moving instinctively and my gaze never leaving the spot where the door had been. My mind was racing. I had to get out of here. I had to leave before it found a way back. I turned, half blinded by the darkness, and stumbled down the narrow hallway. The mirrors, those damn mirrors, were still hanging on the walls, reflecting everything and nothing all at once. They were waiting. I could feel it, feel their eyes on me, as if they knew my every move. Every instinct told me to run, to get away from this house, from whatever I had unleashed. But my feet betrayed me. I was being pulled in one direction, my body moving as if by force, guiding me toward the one place I dreaded most, the attic. I hadn't gone up there yet. I had told myself I would never go, but I knew, deep down, that I had no choice. The house had already seen me, had already touched me. The attic was where it all started. The stairs creaked beneath my weight as I ascended, each step feeling like a countdown. The stench, that horrible metallic scent, grew stronger the higher I went. The shadows on the walls seemed to stretch out, as if they were reaching for me, trying to pull me back. When I reached the top, I hesitated for only a moment before I pushed the door open. The attic was dark, but not entirely. A faint light, somewhere, flickered in the far corner, casting eerie shapes on the walls. The air was thick with dust, the stale scent of something old and forgotten. There was something else in the room. I knew it before I saw it. I could feel it, like a presence that hung in the air, thick and suffocating. And then I saw it. A figure, crouched in the farthest corner, watching me with those same black, empty eyes. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. It was like looking into a mirror, my reflection, but twisted, my face distorted with those hollow, void-like eyes. It smiled, But this time it wasn't just the grin I saw in the mirror earlier. The smile was wider, stretching beyond what was humanly possible. Its lips cracked, revealing rows of sharp teeth, jagged and unnatural. And then it spoke. "You've found me." The words felt like a weight pressing down on me. The air grew thick, heavy, and cold. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body refused to listen. The thing stood, its long limbs creaking as it straightened. Its eyes never left mine. "You shouldn't have opened the door," it whispered, its voice like dry leaves scraping together in the wind. "You can't escape now. You've let me out." The attic seemed to close in around me. The walls seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy. I could hear something moving beneath the floorboards, something scraping, clawing, wanting to be freed. You're not real," I said, my voice weak and trembling, but I forced the words out. I had to believe it, but the thing only laughed, a dry, hollow sound that echoed off the walls. "I am as real as you make me," it whispered. And then I understood. This was never about a door. It was about what I had allowed to slip into this world, what I had invited into this reality, and no matter how much I wanted to deny it, the truth was undeniable. It wasn't just in the house, it was in me, the shadow, the figures, the well. They weren't separate, they were part of me, a part of something I had opened, something I couldn't close again, not without cost. I backed away, stumbling toward the stairs, but the figure moved faster than I could comprehend. It was upon me in an instant, its long fingers wrapping around my wrist, cold and unyielding. "Where do you think you're going?" it rasped. "The door has closed, but the passage remains. You opened it, and now you'll come with me." I screamed, my voice cracking in terror, but it didn't matter. The thing pulled me toward the center of the attic, and I could feel the air shift, the very fabric of reality distorting around us. The walls seemed to melt into darkness, and the floor beneath me gave way. I fell, and the last thing I heard before the world swallowed me whole was the thing's voice, echoing in the distance. "You'll never leave me. You'll never leave."